Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zheng. Yesterday's meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden has attracted considerable attention. Today, I'd like to share my observations on Xi Jinping's visit to the US and the Xi-Biden meeting, along with my thoughts on the meeting's outcome. For me, there are 5 unprecedented events and one inevitable outcome that everyone should be ready for. So please make sure you stay until the end when I convey my most important point. Firstly, there were 5 unprecedented events during Xi Jinping's visit to the US. The first is the unprecedented high price paid for hiring a welcoming crowd. According to messages circulated online, the Chinese embassy in the US promised a daily payment of $400. This is an unprecedented high. Previously, the rates were about 100 or 200 per day, never as high as 400. Of course, this could be due to inflation. Just kidding. A more significant reason is Xi Jinping's unpopularity, making it harder to hire people, so they have to raise the price. The second is the unprecedentedly radical protest slogans. Okay, so here are some of the slogans chanted by protesters. Down with Xi Jinping, try Xi Jinping, long live freedom. Freedom belongs to the people. Freedom will prevail. Democracy will prevail. Xi Jinping will be overthrown. Down with the communists out of China. There are even more radical ones, but I won't translate them to avoid YouTube censorship. In past visits by CCP leaders, many protesters raised specific demands such as releasing certain imprisoned dissidents, respecting human rights, returning confiscated properties, punishing officials who seized their properties, etc. Fundamentally, they still recognize the CCP as China's ruler, hence demanding justice and redress from the CCP. This time, however, protesters didn't make specific demands but directly chanted, "Down with Xi Jinping, down with the communists out of China." This means they no longer acknowledge the CCP's rule and are directly calling for its downfall. This is also unprecedented. Well, thirdly, various dissident groups are seriously discussing specific strategies after the disintegration of the CCP. Prominent Tiananmen Democracy Movement leader Wei Jinsheng, Wang Dan, and Wang Juntao, and hundreds of other dissidents gathered in San Francisco for the conference on the current situation in China before Xi Jinping's arrival in the U.S. And U.S. Congressman Mike Gallagher, chairman of the House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States. And the CCP also attended and spoke and gave media interviews. And this is a press release for the conference. And this is the thing of the press conference. They have agreed that in view of the imminent collapse of the CCP, overseas democracy activists will hold a national affairs conference in Washington, D.C. on March 2nd next year. The aim is to discuss China's future, come up with concrete plans, and present a blueprint for the post-CCP era to the Chinese people and the international community. Wei Jinshan stated that this National Affairs Conference would be modeled after the Continental Congress of the United States, the temporary joint Congress formed by the 13 states from 1774 to 1789, which preceded the U.S. Congress. The hope is that this conference will serve as a prototype for a future parliament in China. I was quite impressed upon hearing this news. As many know, these Tiananmen Square movement leaders have been in exile for over 30 years. In the immediate aftermath of the Tiananmen massacre, there was significant anger and substantial support for the overseas Chinese democracy movement and exiled dissidents. However, due to various factors, the momentum of the overseas democracy movement has diminished. Conflicts and a lack of collaboration among different dissident groups, each competing for leadership, along with the CCP's intentional infiltration and disruption, have fragmented the movement. This has even damaged its reputation, leading many to lose faith in both the movement and its leaders. But this time, it's not just the activists. Many ordinary Chinese people have also realized that the CCP's days are numbered, and it's time to actively plan for a China without the Communist Party. I personally think this is a very meaningful development. The fourth unprecedented aspect was the level of security. As seen in the video, before Xi Jinping's arrival, San Francisco not only erected tall barriers to block protesters, but also cleared the non-standing issue of homeless people from the streets. At the hotel where Xi Jinping stayed, a white tent resembling a funeral tent in Chinese culture was erected, which is considered very ominous. After being mocked online, they covered the white clothes with a blue one, but it still drew mockery from netizens, saying it now looked like the mourning hall for the recently deceased or murdered former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. I initially didn't understand why they erected such a tent outside the hotel and mistook it for a garage. Later, I realized it was mainly to prevent sniper attacks. Xi Jinping's car could drive straight into the tent for him to walk into the hotel from there. This way, the snipers wouldn't have any opportunity during the brief moment between his getting out of the car and entering the hotel. Such high-level security measures were not seen in previous visits of CCP leaders to the U.S. This reflects the fact that the power struggle within the CCP has indeed reached a life or death stage. And Xi Jinping is extremely fearful that his political opponents might use his visit to the US to eliminate him. On the other hand, when a leader becomes obsessively concerned about assassination to a pathological extent, it suggests that his end is not far off, as too many people want him dead, and any day could be the day. From the U.S. side, California Governor Newsom recently visited China and received an extraordinary reception from Xi Jinping. If you compare the seating arrangement of U.S. Secretary of State Blinken during his previous visit to China, you will understand why I say that Newsom received a super special reception. After receiving a super special reception, Nixon also gave Xi Jinping a super special return, even clearing the homeless problem that had not been solved for years in one fell swoop. This extraordinarily favorable gesture to the dictator has raised questions for many American taxpayers. For instance, a follower on my Facebook page tagged me and wrote, "We were at the North Access Point in South San Francisco whole day to unwelcome the authoritarian leader of the People's Republic of China. We welcomed the motorcade of Vice President and President Joe Biden as they came earlier than Xi Jinping, but the level of security changed completely with more police officers and them having equipped with police gears for Xi's passing, which were absent during VP and President Joe Biden motorcade passing. So Governor Gavin Newsom, is this the deal you made with Xi Jinping during your one-on-one meeting with him during your recent visit to China? I'm ashamed as a taxpayer that our state protects dictator and authoritarian leader more than our democratically elected leaders of the United States of America. The fifth unprecedented aspect is the level of animosity Americans hold toward the CCP, with 80% viewing it as an enemy. This, I believe, is also a sign of the CCP's impending demise. By the way, a few hours after the Xi-Biden meeting, the Chinese stock markets opened with all three major A-share indexes falling together. Nearly 4,200 individual stocks declined. Northbound funds representing foreign capital had a net sell-off of more than 2 billion yuan for the day, and mainland China's main funds sold off more than 36 billion yuan throughout the day. This seems to be the Chinese stock market's real verdict of the outcomes of the Xi-Biden meeting, right? Regarding the Xi-Biden meeting itself, I don't have much to say except a few comments about Biden's claim of reaching an agreement with the CCP on combating fentanyl as an achievement. On September 22nd, I made a program discussing how drug production and trafficking have always been a state action of the CCP and a tactic of unrestricted warfare used by the CCP to target opponents. Drug trafficking helped the CCP overcome financial crisis before it took power in China, establishing and expanding its base in Yan'an. That's why some people changed the CCP's slogan, "Without the Communist Party, there is no new China," to "Without opium, there is no Communist Party." I can say that the fentanyl crisis in the US was originally part of the CCP's unrestricted warfare against the US, allowing Americans to use their own money to destroy Americans and weakening the enemy. Promising cooperation on the surface is nothing more than mere lip service. If the CCP really wanted to crack down on fentanyl, it would not have existed in China a long time ago. It would be ridiculous to believe the CCP's promise and take it as an achievement. In fact, since its inception, the communist ideology has aimed to achieve communism globally, abolish private ownership, and destroy all existing orders and human civilization. In this sense, communism is inherently anti-human and anti-humanity. Its global practices have proven it to be an unprecedented enemy of humanity. Xi Jinping constantly talking about staying true to the original aspiration is a faithful believer and executor of communism's dogma. How can one expect him to make fundamental changes and coexist peacefully with the civilized world? This is simply impossible. Even Deng Xiaoping, held by the Western world for initiating China's reform and opening up, talked about hiding one's capabilities and biding one's time. Hiding one's capabilities and biding one's time means to accumulate strength in a period of weakness, not to give up its goals. Therefore, Deng was never a promoter or advocate of a civilized order. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ordered tanks into Tiananmen Square in 1989, unleashing a massacre of innocent students and civilians. This time, during his visit to the US, Xi Jinping put on an unprecedented smiling face. This is merely because he himself is facing unprecedented challenges and difficulties. He seeks to strategically deceive the US again, buying more time and breathing space for himself. If he can gain anything, if he can gain any advantage from the US, it means more military funds to attack Taiwan and a quicker path to global dominance. From the very first day of the establishment of communism, it was already destined that there would be an eventual showdown between it and the civilized world. Perhaps this showdown was pushed forward due to Xi Jinping's belief in the rising of the East and the fall of the West, and the misjudgment of his own strength and that of his opponents. Such a final showdown is inevitable. Sooner or later, it will happen, whether through war or other means. This is why I very much hope that the free world will not have any more illusions about the CCP. Instead, we should join hands with the Chinese people who long for freedom and those who wish to free themselves from the slavery of the CCP to push for the early arrival of a free China without the CCP. Well, that's all for today. Please like, share, and comment on my videos. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel or check if you are still subscribed, as YouTube keeps unsubscribing people for me. Also, you can visit my website at jenniferzengblog.com for membership or donations to support my efforts. In these rapidly changing times, I believe independent voices like mine are very important. Thank you. See you next time.